Kevin Nelson. Here's a look at what's going on this week in the news. We begin with news from the Vatican. During the Pope's weekly general audience this past week, he offered prayers to the people of Mexico suffering the effects of a devastating earthquake that hit Mexico City and neighboring states. Rome Reports has more from St. Peter's Square.
Before beginning the general audience, Pope Francis made the rounds in St. Peter's Square in the Pope-mobile, blessing many children along the way. In his catechesis, he remembered the earthquake Mexico experienced and said that today he is spiritually close to all the people from this country.
Elevemos todos juntos nuestra plegaria a Dios para que acoja en su seno a los que han perdido la vida, conforte a los heridos, sus familiares y a todos los damnificados. Pidamos también por todo el personal de servicio y de socorro que prestan su ayuda a todas las personas afectadas. Y con nuestra Madre, la Virgen de Guadalupe, con mucha ternura, esté cerca de la querida nación mexicana.
As part of his weekly catechesis, the Pope delivered an emotional speech with tips for living a life of hope.
The magnitude 7.1 earthquake caused massive damage with numerous building collapses and about 250 deaths. In news now from around the world, a new UN treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons has been ratified and signed by the Holy See. Archbishop Paul Gallagher, Vatican foreign minister, signed the treaty along with more than 40 other countries. The treaty would enter into force 90 days after at least 50 countries both sign and ratify it. Archbishop Gallagher said that nuclear arms offer a false sense of security. He said peace and international stability cannot be founded on mutually assured destruction or on the threat of annihilation. The new treaty signed by the Vatican bans testing, but also bans efforts to develop, produce, manufacture, acquire, possess, or stockpile nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices. The United States and other countries possessing nuclear weapons did not take part in the negotiations and do not plan to sign the treaty. More news from the Vatican. Pope Francis met this past week at the Vatican with a delegation from the World Muslim League. Among the topics discussed was the possibility of developing a joint permanent committee. Rome Reports has more from the Vatican.
The Pope met with the leader of the main Islamic NGO, the World Muslim League. This Mecca-based organization rejects violence and terrorism and promotes dialogue. It also works in the apologetic defense of Islam and finances some Muslim communities. After the meeting with Muhammad al-Isa, Pope Francis greeted the rest of the delegation. As a gift, the Secretary General gave him this sculpture, a symbol of Islamic architecture and a desire for dialogue. The Pope gave him a pen that imitates the columns of St. Peter's baldachin. He said he hopes Muhammad al-Isa will remember this meeting when he writes messages of peace. According to the Saudi press, al-Isa appreciated the Pope's aversion toward those who identified Islam with extremism or terrorism. Also, according to a Vatican press release, in the meetings at the Vatican, it was reiterated that situations exist where freedom of conscience and of religion are not entirely respected and protected, thus applying an urgent need to remedy this by renewing religious discourse and reviewing school books.
Now in news from around the country, this past week, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee passed a bill to provide emergency relief and aid to Christians and other religious minorities who have suffered persecution at the hands of Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria. The House had unanimously approved the bipartisan bill in a voice vote in June. Now the bill, entitled the Iraq and Syria Genocide Emergency Relief and Accountability Act, will go to the Senate floor. If it passes, it would return to the House for a vote on the amended version and then go to President Donald Trump's desk for his signature. The bill would not only provide humanitarian aid, but also provide accountability for perpetrators of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes in the region. And finally in the news, Pope Francis held an audience at the Vatican September 21st with members of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, including its president, Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston. The Pope told them after listening to abuse survivors and having made what he described as a mistake in approving a more lenient set of sanctions against an Italian priest abuser, he has decided whoever has been proven guilty of abuse has no right to an appeal, and he will never grant a papal pardon because he said the person who does this is sick and has a sickness. The Pope went on to tell them that the Catholic Church has been late in facing and therefore properly addressing the sin of sexual abuse by its members, and the Commission, which he established in 2014, has had to swim against the tide because of a lack of awareness or understanding of the seriousness of the problem. But he said prophets in the Church, including Cardinal O'Malley, have, with the help of God, come forward to shine light on the problems of abuse and to urge the Church to face it. The Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors was meeting in Rome September 21st through the 23rd for their plenary assembly. Well, that is all the information we have for you at this time. I'm Kevin Nelson. Don't forget, you can keep up to date on Catholic news throughout the week with Catholic Newsbreak right here on the Catholic TV network.